This map illustrates the strategic nightmare facing Greece in 480 BCE. Patriotic states are entirely boxed in by Persian-aligned territory. Xerxes advanced with 1.7 million troops and 1,200 warships. This dotted line shows their path toward absolute subjection. Against these numbers, the 31 resisting city-states could only field around 60,000 men. They needed a geographic bottleneck to slow the advance, and a commander willing to lead a mission that offered no chance of survival. Leonidas was born around 540 BCE as the third son of King Xerxes. Because he was not the firstborn heir, he was denied royal exemptions given to future kings, and was instead cast into the same brutal machinery as the common citizenry. The stand at Thermopylae was the deliberate output of this upbringing. It was a victory of societal engineering that transformed a third-born spare into an elite human weapon. At age 7, Leonidas was placed into the Agoge military camp. He was overseen by a warden called the Paedonomos, who was accompanied by a squad of youths carrying whips to punish any boy who stepped out of line. The system enforced a lifestyle of extreme physical deprivation. Boys were permitted only a single cloak for the entire year, and were forced to train barefoot to build the agility and calluses required for swift movement over mountain terrain. Food was strictly rationed to ensure the boys remained lean and hungry. They were encouraged to steal food to practice foraging skills, but if they were caught, they were severely beaten, not for the theft, but for being unskillful enough to get caught. At age 20, Leonidas emerged from this conditioning as a hoplite warrior. He was an expert in the short iron sword and heavy round shield, trained to function as a single cog in a tight, impenetrable phalanx formation. This 13-year cycle of state-sanctioned hardship molded Leonidas into a battle-ready military machine. By the time he reached military service, he had been conditioned to view extreme physical suffering as a baseline for operation. A sudden twist of fate dropped this career soldier onto the throne. After his older brother Cleomenes died in chains, and his brother Dorius died in Sicily, Leonidas unexpectedly became the king of Sparta in 490 BCE. When the Persians arrived 10 years later, Leonidas applied tactical geometry to the landscape. He chose to defend the pass at Thermopylae, which narrowed to just 6 feet wide in places, effectively neutralizing the Persian army's overwhelming numerical superiority. Leonidas hand-picked a vanguard of 300 Spartans, based on a cold, pragmatic requirement. Every soldier chosen was required to have a living son. This ensured their family lines would continue, removing the final psychological distraction from the mission. Before the battle, Persian scouts watched as the Spartans calmly bathed and braided each other's hair. The Persians interpreted this as madness induced by fear. Unaware, they were watching heroes preparing for their final life-and-death struggle. By selecting only men with heirs, Leonidas created a suicide squad with no earthly hesitation. He had assembled a unit that was ready to give its last breath to keep the Persians out of their city-state. The first wave of Persian Medes was funneled into the narrow pass and found their wicker shields were no match for Spartan iron. They suffered heavy losses as they broke against the dense wall of Greek hoplites. When the Persians unleashed their famous arrow barrages, the Spartans moved in unison. They raised their shields overhead to form a tortoiseshell defense, allowing the barrage to bounce harmlessly off the phalanx. Leonidas even utilized feigned retreats, drawing the overconfident Persians forward until they were overextended. On a single command, the Spartans would turn and launch a murderous onslaught against their disorganized pursuers. Even the 10,000 immortals, Xerxes' elite royal bodyguard, failed to break the line. By the second day, some 20,000 Persians had fallen, while the Spartan defenders continued to fight in efficient, alternating relays. The Spartans executed their childhood conditioning with robotic precision. The massacre in the pass was the predictable result of 13 years of drilling, turning a narrow mountain corridor into a high-efficiency kill zone. The defense finally collapsed due to a traitor named Ephialtes. He led 10,000 Persian immortals through a hidden mountain path under the cover of night, allowing them to bypass the Greek wall and outflank Leonidas from the rear. Faced with certain annihilation, Leonidas dismissed the allied Greek troops so they could fight another day. He ordered his 300 Spartans to stay, famously telling them they would dine that evening in the underworld. The final stand was a visceral, unglamorous slaughter. Once their spears and swords shattered, the Spartans resorted to fighting with their bare hands and teeth, forming a final defensive circle around the body of their fallen king. Xerxes was so enraged by the loss of his men that he had Leonidas's corpse decapitated and crucified. It was a desperate attempt to desecrate a man whose stand had already shattered the morale of the Persian army. In those final moments, the mathematically perfect Spartan machine broke down into raw, savage sacrifice. It functioned exactly as it was intended to do when pushed to the absolute breaking point. That sacrifice bought the time necessary for the Athenian fleet to assemble and eventually wreck the Persian navy. This strategic delay broke the momentum of the invasion and saved Greece from total annihilation. Western civilization was preserved not by a mythological superhero, but by a society that successfully engineered the perfect, unyielding human sacrifice.